I have been a Christian all my life. I have gone to church all my life. I have done camp meetings and summer camps and revivals, all, you name it. But I feel like now, for the first time this week, I have fully understood the gospel for the first time in my life. And that's crazy to say. What I learned this week is something that I have not heard ever preached in any of the churches I've ever been to, never heard it from any pastor, never heard it at any sermon, and I'm like, what are we doing? What are we teaching people? Because this is the concept of Christianity that I had up until this week. That, you're a sinner, you've got all this garbage and baggage and junk in your life, right? You feel bad about it, you want to be set free, you want to go to heaven, you want to have a fresh start. You come to Jesus, you repent, you're like, God, I don't want to live that life anymore, I want to be forgiven, right? You accept Jesus, you get baptized, boom, you're a fresh, new creation, all that stuff is gone. Now, what do you do between now and heaven? Now, you try really, really hard, to live, in accordance with your beliefs. You try really, really hard and strive to not make mistakes. And if you do make mistakes, you gotta ask for forgiveness again. And that really just proves that, maybe you're not the best Christian that you thought you were. And we still struggle with these same old patterns and things that we used to struggle with. And we're like, we get down on ourselves. We're like, man, if I just tried harder, I would be a better Christian. It's like, God, please take this from me. Please make me better, change me, transform me, all that language that we're used to hearing, right? And what that does is every time that you feel tempted, every time that you're faced with, something that you want to do that you shouldn't do, you feel in yourself shame. You're like, if I was truly transformed, if I was truly a Christian, if I really loved God, I wouldn't be feeling this way, right? This temptation proves that I'm not changed, I'm not different. And then we start to question, the power of the cross. It's like, did Christ come to really transform me? Does he really have the power to change who I am? And that's why we see a bunch of Christians who say that they're saved but acting the same. They haven't changed at all. They don't really believe they can change, and they believe there's something wrong with them. And so you go into a shame cycle. Every time you stumble, you're like, oh man, I messed up, I'm bad, I haven't changed, I'm no different. All right, and I've experienced this my whole life, all right? You mess up, you internalize the message that you are bad. Not that you just did bad, but that you are bad. And that's the difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is, maybe I shouldn't have stolen that thing, I won't do that again, that was wrong, versus, man, I stole this thing, I am bad, I am a failure, I am worthless. There's a difference between I've done something wrong and I am wrong. So anyways, I was talking to this friend of mine, and he completely revolutionized the way that I look at the Bible, the way I look at Christ, the way I look at grace, and it just blew my mind. And it's a game changer. My whole concept of Christianity is completely changed. So he was saying, what you do, is not your identity. What you do cannot change who you are. So even if you do sin, that doesn't change the new identity that Christ has given you. So he gave this analogy. He's like, okay, Grace, you, up until you became a Christian, you were like a peasant, right? You lived amongst other peasants, you dressed like a peasant, you ate like a peasant, you were a peasant, right? And then the king comes along, and you meet the king, and he meets you, and you look into each other's eyes, and you realize, I want that, and so he goes through the adoption process, and takes you into his home, into his kingdom, signs all the forms, makes everything official, brings you into his palace, and says, that's, it's official now, you are my daughter, you are now a princess of this kingdom. And inside, you're like, wow, this is amazing. But over time, you're like, as time goes on, you're like, am I really though? Do I really deserve to be a princess? You start to remember all the things that you used to do as a peasant, all the dirt floors you used to sleep on, all the, cold oats you used to eat for breakfast. And so you start to wonder, man, am I really changed? Or, is this really real? And so, you can choose as a peasant to go back and hang out with peasants. You can go dress like a peasant still and, give up your robes of royalty and put on rags. You can eat the same meals that a peasant eats. But has that changed your new identity, though? Can anything that you do or how you dress or whatever, is that going to change the fact that the king has the official adoption papers with his stamp of approval on it saying that you are now his daughter and that you are a princess of the kingdom? No, I mean, you might look weird, you know, a princess walking around in rags and, oh, woe is me, I'm not going to take a shower because peasants only shower once a month. You know, like, you might look silly and people might look at you like, why is she acting like a peasant? That's not who she is, right? So it's okay, you know, that was a good analogy. And so he's saying, you know, the belief is our problem. We don't believe that we have a new identity. Like, we don't believe that we are the princess. We believe that we are still a peasant and that we need to earn it to become a princess, even though we've already been given that. All the document has been signed, Christ has died, he has risen, it's done, right? And so he's saying, he told me that now, whenever you're faced with a temptation or a struggle or something that, you know, you feel you want to do, but, you know is wrong or whatever, he's like, that's not you anymore. Those thoughts, those feelings, they are not indicative of your true identity. And I had to ask him to explain this a little bit because I wasn't really following. He's like, the devil knows you. Okay, the devil's been around for a while. He's been around since before we were, right? Since before the earth was created. He has a pretty good idea of what human behavior is like. He's watched us grow up. He probably knows us better than we know ourselves, unfortunately. And he knows the things that we used to struggle with and the things that used to ensnare us when we used to be slaves to sin. That used to be our identity, was being a slave to sin because we had no other option. There was no other identity, but when we became Christians and we accepted Christ, our old identity was literally killed. That's what baptism is. You go into the water, your flesh dies, you're raised up, and Christ's spirit is now in you. That is your new identity. Doesn't matter if you feel it. There's not like a magical, like, fairy dust that descends upon you when you get baptized and, you know, and Christ comes into your life. But that's what Jesus says. Like, are we gonna base our identity based off how we feel or what Jesus says? Feel or faith? Like, do you walk by feelings or do you walk by faith? So no, you may not feel different, but the Bible says that you are, and that's what he says. So that's what I believe. And so he was saying, the devil, again, he knows what the things you used to struggle with, the things that you used to be a slave to. I don't know, sexual impurity, porn, masturbation, lying, gossiping, I don't know, whatever. And so, of course, he's going to use those same things to try and tempt you now in your new identity, in your new creation status, to try and make you think that you have not changed. He's going to take that same thing, whether you used to struggle with gossiping then, he's going to try to make you struggle with it now. Because he knows that you're going to think, man, you know, maybe the cross really wasn't able to change me. Maybe the cross really isn't that powerful where I'm really changed and saved and a new person. You see that temptation, you see that struggle, you're like, man, like, maybe it just didn't work. Maybe something's wrong with me. Shame cycle all over again. And when you think you're bad, when you believe you're bad, you're going to behave like you are. You behave like what you believe. So you believe in your new identity, you're going to act like it, you're going to walk in it. And this is the part that changed my life and, like, is a game changer for me. So he said, sorry, I'm just really excited. So he was saying, in your new creation, when you believe who you truly are, that I am a pure and blameless princess of the Lord, whenever I'm faced with something that I know I deep down do not want to do at all, then I don't have to view that temptation as coming from inside of me. I don't have to view that temptation as being who I am, because it's not. When I feel something like that, or when I'm, you know, tempted or whatever, that is a direct assault against me from the enemy. That is, I'm being attacked. This is my castle walls, and the enemy is trying to invade and come into me with this temptation. And that changed everything for me. No longer do I have to look at it as like, man, like, why am I still struggling with this? God, like, man, I thought, you know, you would take this from me. Lord, I've asked you to transform me. I've asked you to, like, you know, purify me and make me want to do good things. It's like, no, that is not you. That is the enemy. He's trying to attack you, and he's trying to get you to do all these things that are contrary to your identity. And so the amazing thing is that when you look at it that way, it's no longer a source of shame. It's not. Like, an attack there's nothing to be ashamed about that you're being attacked. So if I'm walking down the street, right, just taking a walk, minding my own business, living my life, and some rando comes and throws a stone at me and it hits me in the face, am I going to be upset at him, or am I going to feel like, oh man, I'm a really bad person, I shouldn't have, let that stone hit me in the face? Like, no, like, that's not a source of shame. I didn't obviously ask for that. I didn't take the stone and smash my own face. Like, the guy's a jerk. Like, okay, like, the devil is a jerk face. He's a meanie head. Like, he is obviously being the one at fault here. So, like, now, knowing who I am, knowing that I am sharing the same spirit as Christ, that I am in unity with him, that I am his princess, that I'm not who I was before. If I'm facing a temptation, like, man, I really just want to steal that really pretty shirt over there because I don't have $85 to spend on this really high quality, I don't know, brand name item, and I would look so pretty in that. Oh man, I have to have it. Like, and deep down, I'm like, I don't steal. I'm not a thief. Like, no part of me wants to go down that path. I don't have to feel bad, like, man, like, why am I thinking these thoughts? Like, oh man, this just proves that I'm just a sinner and I'm going to continue to stumble. No, I'm like, I just look at that for what it is. Like, Satan is trying to attack me right now. It's a direct assault against my identity, and I can be like, look at him and say, absolutely not. That is not going to happen. Like, I am not going to do that. And I don't have to feel a source of shame about that. I don't have to feel shame for any temptation that now comes my way, because that is not who I am. And that's a game changer, because it's shame that keeps you in that cycle, that keeps you sinning and keeps you making the same mistakes and doing the same things over and over and over again. And also what shame does is it keeps you isolated. When you feel ashamed, you do not want to talk about it. Like, pornography is one of those things that, oh man, the devil's all over that. Like, people feel, like, people who are addicted to pornography or whatever, they're like, I can't tell anyone about this because, man, it's really embarrassing, and like, I would feel so ashamed to tell anyone. That's where Satan wants you. Like, he does not want you to share or talk to people about it, because each individual person who is addicted to porn, they think they're the only ones, or they think that no one else will understand, right? And so there is power in speaking and sharing and talking about things and sharing your testimony with someone else that's going through the same thing, because once you say something out loud and talk about with another person, for some reason, like, it loses its power. Like, when you say it out loud, it sounds silly, and you're like, and you realize that you're not the only one struggling with it, and that there's not actually anything crazily wrong with you. So the devil wants you to keep quiet. He doesn't want you to talk, because there's power in your testimony. And so that's another reason why shame is terrible. Anyways, so now I'm able to look at a temptation and be like, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. Why? Because that's not who I am. That has no power over me. It just doesn't. And this verse that my friend talked to me about from Ephesians 6, he says, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against kingdoms, rulers, powers, and authorities. And I was like, mind blown. We do not wrestle against our own flesh. We do not wrestle against our own flesh and blood. Like, because that part has died. Like, literally, it died when we accepted Christ into us and accepted his spirit, because sin and Jesus can't coexist together. One of them has to leave. And so when you accept Christ in, the sin has to go. So we are no longer wrestling against flesh and blood. We are not trying to, wrestle against our old identity versus our new identity. We have our new identity. And so what we're really wrestling against is the kingdoms, powers, rules, and authorities. It's Satan and his angels and the enemy. He's throwing these little temptation darts at us, hoping that something will, puncture our castle walls of our identity. And we don't have to. Like, we don't have to accept that anymore. We don't have to take, that as an indicator of who we are or how far we've come or any of that. And it's just, the gospel is just so beautiful. Like, I feel like all my life I've believed like this neutered and powerless version of the gospel, this tame, domesticated version of the gospel, when the gospel is so much more, it's so much more than that. And I don't know why I haven't heard this ever before in my life. My dad's a pastor, and I haven't heard this ever in my life. Like, I was raised like the most churchy anyone could have ever been raised. I went to private school for part of my life. I went to Adventist school or Christian education and for college. Like, it's just, I'm just so passionate about this, because if you know who you are and if you know your true identity, you don't have to stumble. You don't have to live in your old identity anymore. And it's just so freeing. Like, this is what Christ was talking about when he said, I have come to set you free. Like, I've come to set the captives free. Like, we are no longer slaves to that old identity anymore. And it's just the most beautiful thing in the world. And I just hope that you can, you hear this and you can accept this and realize who you truly are and not feel shame ever again, because Christ has given you He's made you a new creation. He has written a new name for you on a white stone, and that's your true identity.